Here is the recording from that control centre where the guy, after being told there were explosions, people on the tracks, smoke and all sorts of things, despite all that information coming earlier on, he happily puts out an announcement that it was just a power surge. This is the raw audio taken from the inquest, which is on my YouTube channel.
A major power failure has occurred on the London Underground, and this may extend to outside areas. Further details will be broadcast as soon as the situation becomes clearer. In the meantime, station supervisors should assess their own situation and, if necessary, close their station to incoming passengers. Visual checks whether train services are still operating and whether station lighting is operating should be made. Because the failure is widespread, staff may also experience difficulty contacting their line controllers, and all calls should be kept to a minimum. As soon as we do have an update, we will advise you. End of message.
That's why the media reported it, and if there are any theories about power surges, then Mr. Keith, there's your evidence why. But then even further, listen to this guy. Even when the control centre had pretty much established that it was some kind of terrorist attack, and obviously knew that it was more than a power surge, this guy bizarrely rings in. I don't know whether he's higher up than the guy in the control centre, but he's quite authoritative. But he tries to keep saying that it is power problems and that it's not an explosion or terror attack. Listen to this.
Yes, Andy Barr.
Hello, Andy. It's Nigel.
Yeah, we don't put out things like it's an explosion. We think that the train's hit a tunnel wall at Edgware Road.
Right. Oh, do you want to put it as that then, Andy, yeah?
At the moment. Alleged hit the tunnel wall, yes.
Right, because I just want to find out for myself.
Yeah.
I spoke to Paul Sawyer. Is it a technical explosion or is it...
No. A cable, a high voltage cable went in the Liverpool Street area.
Right.
That's what's caused the bang.
Right.
As is usual, when you have a train hit the tunnel, people heard an explosion. It is not an explosion.
It's just actual hit the tunnel wall, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, Andy. All right.
So there you go. Very strange indeed. All of that is on my YouTube channel. The raw audio, not given to you by the mainstream media. They've got really short, cut-up versions, cherry-picked out certain things. But I've got all of it on the YouTube channel. Some comments have even been censored, so be sure to check it out on YouTube, youtube.com/WideShut UK, in case they remove it or do something to my channel. I'm getting lots of bizarre things happening recently during this 7/7 inquest. But moving on from that, the point Mr. Keith makes about there being no evidence for bombs going off under the trains is essentially a lie. There were reports of people falling down holes in the floor of the carriages. That's backed up by the new emergency calls, but there's also several, witness testimony. There's witness testimony about this stuff. Most famously, Bruce Late in the Cambridge Evening News basically said he didn't see a bomber, he didn't see a bag, but there was a hole that looked like it had blown upwards. So now I'm going to take you to a clip in my 7/7 film, which pretty much lays out the evidence for bombs going off underneath the carriages, as opposed to being in rucksacks. Several images were released after the bombings showing the trains and inside the carriages. Unfortunately, none of them show a clear or consistent view of the blast sites. The official narrative claims the bombers placed their rucksacks on the floor and that the explosions were inside the carriages. But conflicting eyewitness reports suggest some bombs may have been placed under the carriages and blasts came up through the floor. If this was the case, we'd expect to see bits of metal frayed and pointing upwards. This won't be clear without full disclosure of all carriage images. Although off-duty police lady Lizzie Kenworthy did describe how one victim was impaled when metal had twisted up through the middle of the carriage. At the Edgware Road attack, eyewitnesses initially told Guardian reporter Mark Hollingsborn that blasts came from beneath the trains.
This is Mark Honigsbaum reporting from the London Hilton Hotel opposite Edgware Road station, where we believe there was an explosion this morning under the carriage of a train. What seems to have happened is that sometime around 9:30 this morning, passengers in a train from Edgware Road travelling to Paddington, they just left Edgware Road station when suddenly they felt they had a massive explosion. And some passengers described how the tiles, the covers on the floor of the train suddenly flew up, raised up. And
months later, he said other witnesses thought the bombs were on the train and that he didn't want to be used in conspiracy theories. But there are many more eyewitnesses that remember a similar thing.
But feeling it as well, you know, tremors, shiver all the way up through your body. My whole body shook, and this floor panel came up underneath my feet. I actually thought I was dead at the time because I could see nothing or hear nothing, and I remember squeezing my legs, squeezing them because I thought that they were gone.
A further eyewitness, Anita Kinsley, said the tiles on the floor of my carriage suddenly shot up. Also, Sean Barron, who was helping victims, said one gentleman told him the floor of the train had blown up.
In the one train at Edgware Road, one of the patients who I was dealing with inside the hotel described a large hole which had been blown in the floor, and I believe in the process one gentleman was either thrown out of the train or fell through the hole, but he was pinned underneath one of the trains.
Eyewitness Bruce Late of the Liverpool Aldgate blast told the Cambridge Evening News, "The policeman said, 'Mind that hole, that's where the bomb was.' The metal was pushed upwards as if the bomb was underneath the train. They seemed to think the bomb was left in a bag, but I don't remember anybody being where the bomb was, or any bag."
As I was getting off the train, I noticed that there was a hole, and the hole was as if there was a bomb or the explosion had burst up through the floor of the train, and that was just about there.
So there is definitely a contradiction here. If the official narrative was based off eyewitness accounts, why did the writer only pick one version of accounts, the version with the least publicly available witness statements? If it was based on photo evidence, it would be in the public's best interest to see all of that photo evidence. Mr. Hugo Keith says there's no evidence for that. Well, he himself might be privy to evidence that does prove that the bombs were just placed on the floor in rucksacks. And if he is, then let's see it. This is the problem. The government make these claims. Then there are these contradictions that independent researchers discover. But the government never released the evidence to back up their claims. And this brings me to the new video evidence. At no point does this new video evidence actually show the blast holes, the immediate blast sites where the bombs were supposedly placed. There's a split second of what might be one of the blast sites, but remember there was 3 carriages that were attacked, but it's not really clear anyway. So we still can't determine whether they were in the rucksacks or if they blew upwards from beneath the carriages. We still can't determine that. You know, we were hoping for evidence in this inquest to prove either way, but we're still going round in circles here. They have all this shocking new video evidence, which is actually only a few minutes long and doesn't really show anything. Most of this new evidence is totally irrelevant. And as reported in the Sun newspaper, this footage was an edited version of the footage. And also in the Telegraph it said, Great care has been taken and the material has been edited and re-edited to make sure you do not see any of the deceased. Surely they can show the holes without showing us the dead bodies. Just crop the image a bit. Yeah, not so much that we can only see a bit of the hole, like the first image that was released from inside the carriages, but just show us the holes and be done with it. Is it really that bad if we see a bit of blood? They've already shown us images of body parts in bags. And of course we may be getting ahead of ourselves because there isn't even conclusive evidence about what bombs were used. It was established within days that high-grade, possibly military plastic explosives were used in the attacks. And then of course it changed to homemade explosives. So I made the case in the film that we might be dealing with two different types of explosives at once. And this brings us to the new CCTV evidence released, which, again, you can watch on my YouTube channel. It shows the alleged bombers in B&Q reportedly buying equipment for their bombs. But what type of bombs? Well, it's never really been established or made clear what type of devices were used. Not in the official narrative anyway, so we can't be sure what they're buying is even relevant. You know, they might be buying a certain tool, but who's to say that tool's used to make the bombs if we don't know what bombs they made? But then there's footage of them in a supermarket buying ice to supposedly keep their bombs cold. So this new evidence doesn't really prove anything because they've never adequately explained what type of bombs or devices they used. It came out through the media, and it was later said that they used a substance called TATP, triacetone triperoxide. But as I revealed in the film, TATP doesn't explode with heat or fire, so that's not consistent with charring and reports of being engulfed in flames and people's burns and things like that. And it's obviously not consistent with the experts that said it was military plastic explosives. Do you remember this article in the Times where it says, traces of military plastic explosive more deadly and efficient than commercial varieties are understood to have been found in the debris? What, did that just come out of nowhere? No, forensic scientists and people at the scene told the media that that's what it was. And it says, according to one scientist, homemade explosives can be made, but not of the design and sophistication of these devices. The bomb maker has highly developed skill. So do you think they pulled this off with a bit of ice from the supermarket and some stuff from B&Q? I don't think so. The bombers could have used homemade explosives, but something else also went on those trains, and they're not investigating it, and they're not telling us about it. And it certainly isn't being brought up in this inquest. So Mr. Keith continues in this Evil Conspiracy Theories article and says, there is no evidence at all that we have seen to suggest that the bombers were duped in some way, or that they did not know that they were going to die, or even more absurdly that they did not know that they were carrying explosives at all. Well, there is evidence that there were other explosives present, Mr. Keith. Were they aware of those? I guess we can't ask them because they're dead. Now, the point I made in the 7/7, the big picture film, is that the bombers could have been involved and could have wanted to do terrorism. I think we should all be open to that, and if we're not, then we become kooky conspiracy theorists that aren't being objective and looking at all the evidence and all the angles. However, there is another side to all of this that I do deal with in the film, and I guess it's this old saying, all roads lead to Rome. So even if the bombers did do it, our government, in the evidence I've uncovered, are at least involved in some way. You know, our government or the intelligence services are still intimately and suspiciously tied to the attacks. Keith says there's no evidence of them being duped. well, there is evidence that they were being groomed. And I lay all that out in the last bits of the film.